Hi, I'm Kata and welcome to the Walk the Valley, the podcast that breaks down the barriers to bringing healthcare innovation to market. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Morgan, an industrial designer turned health tech entrepreneur and founder of Nano-Lit Technologies. Unlike many health tech founders who came from medical or technical backgrounds, Sarah brings design thinking into hospital and elder care environments, using light to support healing and sleep health. Sarah, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself? How did you get into the healthcare sector?
Thanks, and thank you so much for having me, Catalin. I really appreciate being brought into the conversation that you're having in this field. My background as an industrial designer comes from training at Pratt Institute in New York. And the focus there is on designing for mass production. So you're always starting with the problem and reversing into the solution with the focus on manufacturability. So producing solutions at scale. I became interested in healthcare because of my long-term fascination with light and its effect on us biologically. My story with light started at 11 when I had a horrific migraine being outside in the scorching heat. We had family challenges, and I also had stress at school, and that combined into just the most painful 12-hour migraine. So I then discovered lighting at 14 in the industrial design program, and it really changed the way I look at light and set me on a lifelong journey with some deviations into how we can use light to support health and wellness.
Your journey started really early from a migraine.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And then you built on top of that. Was it ever a question whether you wanted to use lighting solutions for healthcare, or you knew right away that this is a tool that can change people's lives and have an effect on their health?
Yeah. In my master's thesis, I focused on mimicking nature in light, so biomimicry and lighting. And LED in 2003 was just emerging as something that you could use in commercial lighting technologies beyond the remote control for TV. And I saw a huge opportunity because of the intensity of the light that it could emit, and then how that freed up form factors. Now, when I came back to lighting in 2012, quantum dots were emerging as a technology for display. And again, I saw that their size and their power could further free us up from the typical form factor of lighting. And actually, when we look at how we receive light in the indoor environment through the window, it's dispersed. There is, we don't look at the sun. We don't look at a point source of light. We experience a wash of light. So quantum dots allowed me to think about light as a material. And at that point, I'd just come out of the fashion industry, working with fabrics and materials in mass production. I thought, well, what if we could make light a material that we use in the design process the same way we think about wood or glass or cement? And Louis Kahn was a big sort of philosophical mentor for me during my master's thesis, and he always talked about light as a material. So it was really inspired by him.
Yeah, now that you mention, we don't think about light as a ray of the light, but as something covering the space we're in, like a blanket of light. That's so interesting to put it into this perspective. For those like me who don't really know anything about the physics of light, can you explain what are quantum dots?
Yes, quantum dots are a nanochemistry. I care about their ability to emit very accurate wavelengths of light. The way that they do that is by, let's call it downshifting light that comes into the quantum dots. that capability means we can have far greater accuracy on the light that we emit. And as a result, far greater efficiency because you're having to use less light to get more accurate wavelengths out. And in LED, we use phosphors in front of what's called a pump, which is the basic light source. And that basic light source in general lighting is a blue pump. And then the phosphor in front of it converts it into whatever color is being applied. Now, phosphors are measured in micrometers, the materials that are used. But quantum dots are measured in nanometers. So right there, you don't need to understand nanoscience to know, okay, that's a lot smaller. And when you make things smaller, it's easier to, first of all, put more of them into a smaller space. And that's where you get a higher conversion rate of the light that you're putting into it. Whereas with standard phosphors, there's a lot of space between those phosphor materials for the original blue pump light to get out. And that's where we hear about, issues with blue light at night, because that's what's lighting most of the phosphors. And the other clever thing about quantum dots is that it's their size, not their chemical composition, that determines the wavelength of light that they emit. So when they make phosphors, they're mixing batches of chemicals each time. And between each batch, it's accurate, but it's nowhere near as accurate when you just control the size. So it's almost as if we're moving from cassette tape to digital.
So this is important because the better you can control the wavelength of the light, the better you can influence the nervous system. And that's how you end up using it for healthcare. And in healthcare, for what exactly?
So I'm not a photobiologist. So a photobiologist really focuses in on like skin conditions and, as far as I know, conditions is the main area for photobiologists. But I focus in on the circadian system. So there are these receptors in the eye. They got quite famous in 2017 because of the Nobel Prize for Medicine and Physiology was awarded to 3 circadian rhythm researchers. And it really cemented our understanding around these receptors. So we haven't been too knowledgeable about the circadian system and light's effect on it until the past decade. Although there's decades of research, sort of industry acceptance and agreement has only really happened in the last decade. So that's the area that I focus on, are those receptors that are responsible for what time of day you produce different hormones and chemicals. And of course, the most notable are melatonin and cortisol. So we want to produce melatonin at night. We want to produce cortisol in the morning. And light is the most important input for the production of those hormones.
That's super interesting. And with NanoLit, you're creating lighting systems to mimic this in hospital settings, right?
Yes, so we want to mimic what we evolved under as much as possible in all environments at all times. And the sector where I need to do less education, because they already know this, because they put all the recovery rooms around the outside of the building next to windows, is in hospital environments and senior care environments. They don't get to go outside. Patients, residents, they don't get to go outside and have access to sunlight. So you need even more in those environments to be replicating what is actually going on outside.
And in elder care, the role of lighting is very important, right? Because in dementia, there's this phenomena when the sun goes down and the patient or the person with dementia becomes confused and agitated. It's called the sun downing effect.
That's right, yeah.
You can work with your lighting system to ease this condition.
Yes, and of course it's still not an art, and there's a lot of science, but I think in the implementation of technologies, it's still somewhat experimental. But of course, with dementia, with Alzheimer's, more and more we see it's about lifestyle. And if we can change lifestyle habits, it makes a huge difference. You know, even I notice if I go out for a walk when I first get up in the morning, I'm in the sunlight, my day is a lot different than if I don't. So what's happening at sunset is that the person may have not really had enough light during the day. And now sunset is happening. There's confusion in the brain over the light the person is experiencing and what that signals to the body. So if they've been in a dark environment all day and now the lights come on at night, you're really confusing the brain over what time of day it is. So if there's a way to increase full spectrum during the day and then maybe create a smoother sunset inside than what is going on outside, that could be the only thing where you're changing what we evolved under. Perhaps locally, the sunset is very fast. But indoors, if you make that sunset more gradual, that person's body and brain has more time to assimilate to the change in light in their eyes.
Wow, this is so interesting and such a very simple change to a care environment that's easily implemented, but has a huge impact on how recovery or living with dementia happens.
Yes.
So you come from design background and you bring design thinking into the healthcare innovation sector. This is super interesting for me because my personal experience is that design thinking is often ignored or overlooked as a tool to design for patients or healthcare staff. Can you explain a little bit how the design thinking process works?
Yeah, I observe that in particularly hospital and senior care environments, the pressures on the staff are to heal and turn over patients. So obviously in senior care, it's about long-term care. Hospitals, it's about short-term care. But the point is, the service that is required of the employees is beyond normal requirements for a human being. And so in that regard, they really don't have time for anything that seems outside of an emergency or maintenance that prevents an emergency. And in their minds, lighting is very, very, very low on that list of things to care about. Yeah. They understand the problem. They know that this is a potential solution. But now, when you're getting into the purchasing of this solution, you're dealing with a department that focuses on an entirely different set of pressures. And that's the electrical and maintenance department. And they've got to maintain a budget. They've got to make sure that every resource they invest in has an immediate payback. And because we have such a recent understanding of the impact of light on human health, the education required of this department, this facilities manager, the maintenance department, the electrical team, bringing them up to speed on why this matters. Again, they've got emergencies to deal with. They've got maintenance issues, a stress on their time, and they're incentivized to keep the machine running. So learning human biology and light is not their area of interest. So now they have to rely on the supply chain. But if the supply chain isn't up to speed, you have a challenge. So I think that whilst the solution is simple and helpful, the process for getting it into the healthcare system is very challenging.
There's two things I would like to unpack here. One is the process of design thinking, right? As you explained, this whole very complicated process of getting the lighting solution to the healthcare system, you explained it through empathizing with the maintenance people, with the maintenance department, defining the problem and coming up with the idea. And then you already built a prototype and now you're testing it in a hospital environment. So these are the steps of design thinking, right? Empathizing, defining the problem, ideating a solution, creating the prototype, and then testing it. And then iterating this process if the test requires more.
Yes, that's a very good summary of everything I just said. Yes, I could have put it in more succinct language, but I think it's something I'm still learning, right? It's not so much design thinking. I'm not still learning that, but I'm still learning the healthcare environment and just all the ways in which adopting new solutions can be blocked. And yes, the design thinking approach is don't skip over those problems, face them and include those in your solution. So yes, thank you.
Okay, so we established it's really difficult to bring new solutions to the healthcare system, especially if they're not acutely solving patient problems. Yeah. But how do you deal with this? How do you find the right decision makers to bring your product into the healthcare, to even just test it?
I don't have a one size fits all answer to that question. I'm currently addressing another issue in the lighting industry, which is value engineering. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase. Value engineering is a stage in the construction process that looks at what was scoped in the project as the platinum level construction of this building. And they say, great, this is the standard we want to hit. Okay, now how do we go into each supply chain and reduce cost? And lighting is one of the first to get hit. And this is just because, you can go to your local hardware store and pick up a cheap light. And if you don't know better, what's the difference? Why am I paying $500 when I can pay $5? My job now is to go to the people who are designing the lighting, getting value engineered out of the process, and finding out more about that struggle. The amazing thing is that once you just tap on that door, it flies wide open and you hear all the problems. So I think that's the thing. It's seeing where the problem is and then confirming it exists. And I know there's a proper title and process for this in the what's it called, the Canvas model, where you're testing a hypothesis.
We had an episode about this. You need to find the problem and then create the solution. Confirm that it exists.
Yeah, confirm that it exists, because
then create a solution. Instead of creating a solution for a problem that might not exist or might need a different solution.
Yeah, and when I first started looking into this, I was focused more on like a database of solutions. Well, they've got the solutions. That's not the problem. The problem is getting those solutions implemented just hits a wall with every lighting designer that I speak to. So that wall is what's preventing the adoption of this new, very helpful technology. So yeah, I think that's the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, these walls we all hit with the different solutions for the healthcare systems. It's really difficult to get in, but once you're in, it kind of works out.
But the wall is also the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. If you see it that way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You explained the strategy. Your strategy is to go down the supply chain and find the blocks that are hindering you from getting your products implemented and work with those blocks to solve them, which I think is a really good advice in any part of the healthcare industry.
Yeah, I always come back to the smartphone as an example. It used to be that you would buy a phone for a few euros, plug it in the wall, and, you just didn't think of phones as things that you would spend a lot of money on. Then you had the mobile phone. Those were expensive for a while, and they came down in price. And then you got the smartphone, and now you were just in a whole new world. And price, of course, with Apple, most people don't think about it. You just accept that this is something you're going to invest money in. And I think that can happen in almost any industry when you make the benefit so screamingly obvious that it's no longer a wall.
Yeah. Now, about screaming the obvious, your product, NanoLit's product, is not a medical device. So do you still have to validate this product and certify it to a certain standard?
Yeah, so there are certifications in the lighting industry. There are recommendations that the Illuminating Engineering Society publishes, but lighting, general lighting, which is the sector I work in, is not regulated by any clinical organization. I do think that will change, and I think it should change because of this. As I mentioned, the 2017 Nobel Prize, we know a lot more, but that process, I'm sure, will take years. And in the meantime, it also gives the industry a chance to really shift, because it also has to change its supply chain, and that's not cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. In your experience, what's the key to success when selling to hospitals or senior care facilities?
Definitely navigating different disciplines and promoting collaboration across the disciplines. The maintenance, the electrical, the circadian researcher, the lighting manufacturer, they all have very, very valuable inputs. And I think bringing them along in the conversation from early on is important. So the route that I went was via the circadian rhythm researchers, and that's really just timing. When COVID hit, all of their studies got shut down, so they were available, and we met every month for 2 years online. But that resulted in a number of very credible universities lending me time and energy for feedback on how to move this forward. So that's how I did it. And also, I think the circadian rhythm research community really doesn't get the credit and the funding that it deserves. So I think opportunities to be heard, don't underestimate how little experts get listened to, and really appreciate being heard, and their knowledge and expertise, actually makes a difference in the world. So that's how I approached it.
COVID actually came to your service by surprising you with a lot of access to the scientists, and you got a good chance to confirm the problem and then design around it. Or design for it. Okay, last question. What's next for NanoLit?
Well, we know the impact of light on human health. The industry is undergoing a huge shift for a number of different reasons. Its opportunity is in health, but it's very frightened to cross that chasm. So I think that we need better testing of lighting. We need to build a language that the layman can understand and use when it comes to circadian health and lighting. And we need certifications that really make it easy for the customer to adopt and understand and even observe the positive outcomes. So I'm really focused on testing. How do we test light sources to make sure that they're actually having a positive impact on our circadian health?
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful that we got to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Walk the Valley. My conversation with Sarah Morgan reminded me that innovation isn't just about technology. It's about asking the right questions and digging deep into the entire system around the problem. Through the story of NanoLit, Sarah showed us how design thinking can guide us from the physics of light all the way through the complexities of the supply chain, ultimately leading to solutions that truly serve patients and care providers. It's a powerful reminder that to build something that lasts, we can't just scratch the surface. We need to understand the science, the people, and the system in equal measure. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps us share more unfiltered insights from innovators shaping the future of healthcare. You can find Walk the Valley on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep walking the valley.